Shadowrun Hong Kong was originally released in 2015, but an extended edition, with a small bonus campaign, was released in 2016. It's set in the sci-fi fantasy setting of Shadowrun, which is a tabletop RPG. Explaining all of the lore would take a long time, because it's a rather rich setting to play in. So I'm just going to give a quick and dirty rundown of some main points. And, by the way, the game does do a good job of explaining what you need to know. If you're not familiar with the Shadowrun setting, then you'll only miss some references which add depth to the game world. On the flip side, if you're a seasoned Shadowrunner, then there are many details to enjoy. Character creation and lore. In the Shadowrun setting, magic in the universe waxes and wanes like the moon does. Earth is affected by this, just like everything else, and has gone through magical phases as a result. Our present, real-life Earth is akin to Shadowrun's non-magical fifth world, called such because of Mayan calendar stuff and because it's the fifth recorded shift. Shadowrun campaigns take place after the sixth world begins, after magic comes back in 2011. Magic changed many things when it returned. You can see some of these changes in character creation. All of these races are called metahuman because orcs, elves, dwarves, and trolls all sprang into being from humans. Dwarves and elves came in the natural way. Gobletization came later in 2021 and affected 10% of the planet by randomly turning them into orcs and trolls. Each race comes with its own benefits. Orcs and trolls tend to get more prejudice directed at them, and this is mentioned a couple of times in the game. However, it doesn't significantly affect gameplay if you decide to pick either of those races. Magic also comes into play when it's time to select a class. Some individuals are born with magical potential. This is why the choices of Shaman, Adept, and Mage are available. Shaman can summon spirits, read auras, and use conjuring spells. Mages can use a large variety of other, different spells, and Adepts can do key casting through their bodies, which allows for superhuman feats with a magical spin. For example, there's an armor-damaging punch called Celestial Mana Fist. Meanwhile, as magic flooded back, technological progress didn't stop. This is why there are also cyberpunk and general sci-fi elements in this fantasy setting. Cybernetic enhancement slots in two additional classes, Riggers and Deckers. Riggers can mentally control drones and sometimes other mechanical devices too. These guys give a new meaning to Gearhead. In the game, drones basically act like familiars. They add significant firepower and can also occasionally go through vents to access blocked off areas. Riggers can also occasionally control other mechanical objects, but these moments are rare and only available in certain dialogue choices. Deckers are modern, sixth world programmers. They can hack devices and mentally enter the Matrix, which is essentially an advanced version of the internet. If a Decker's consciousness is jacked into the Matrix, then they run around as an avatar, fight or hide from the representations of programs, and try to pass through firewalls to gain access to sensitive data and equipment. Some of this gathered data can also be sold later on, too. Once a mission is complete, then it can be posted for sale anonymously online. The seller is then paid by the highest bidder. Deckers can also often control the same objects that Riggers can when the option's available in a dialogue choice, but the difference is that a Decker hacks the object, while a Rigger rewires it. Which class you choose is up to personal preference. There's not really one which is vastly better than the others. You can even mix and match abilities and not go with a preset class. You have several NPCs who can accompany you on missions, and this makes it easy to balance the team. There are also many experience points, called karma, given out over the course of the game. So if you want to build up dialogue affecting traits such as intelligence or charisma, then that's easy to do without screwing up your build. As long as you specialize in what you do and don't spread out your points too thinly across several different skills, then you should do well. No matter which class or race you pick, you play as someone who was adopted as a child. You and your adoptive brother were both rescued from living in a slum by a man called Raymond Black. He asks you to go to Hong Kong to help him with something. Something bad happens, and then it's up to you to figure out what happened to him, while also running from the law. You got framed for stuff that you didn't do, and that's also something that you need to figure out. In the meantime, you go to Hai for safety. It's a dangerous area by the waterfront, dominated by gangsters, and you have to go shadowrunning to get resources and aid from the local triad boss. And now we've come to the name of the game, Shadowrun. Shadowrunning is essentially a mixed bag of thieving and killing. It's mercenary work. Stealing secrets, objects, and people are all possible jobs. Assassinations, sabotage, and other types of work can be possible too. But no matter the job, it's all mercenary work and it's done in teams. Generally, shootouts are meant to be avoided, but corporations use lethal force to protect their property, and a run can always go poorly. In fact, runs often go poorly. This is why runners' lifespans are notoriously short. It's a dangerous profession. Shadowrunners are normally seen as disposable assets by those who employ them, too. This is why guns, grenades, medical kits, armor, and other combat items are Shadowrunning necessities. The gameplay. It's often possible for runs to go smoothly, without much violence. Charisma checks open many doors, and the same's true for money. At other points, there are alternative, creative solutions, which utilize class skills. Some fights are unavoidable, but many can be bypassed in one way or another. This was true in the last game of the series too. I played Shadowrun Dragonfall before I played Shadowrun Hong Kong. Opening doors non-violently was often more interesting to me than just kicking them down. This was because, with non-violence, I gained additional dialogue, and the solutions to problems felt more varied and creative, and I liked that. It made the roleplay seem deeper. In that game, I'd played as an elven shaman. Shamans are a charisma-based class, and elves get a charisma bonus, and because that's a good combo for prioritizing dialogue over combat, I used it again. After all, it had worked well for me in Dragonfall. But I learned that trying to optimize my PC's charisma turned out to be unimportant for Hong Kong. An elf shaman is still a fine choice for a playthrough, but I could have played as any class or race combo and still chosen similar dialogue options throughout the game. The differences would have been minor. This was due to 2 reasons. Number 1 is that Hong Kong improves on how companions can aid the PC. For example, Ractor has a high intelligence score, and that let me pass a check of 6 towards the end of the game. Similarly, a player could likely bring along Gobbet if they wanted to pass charisma checks. In the last game, companions couldn't help with stat checks such as these, they could only help with class checks. Their being able to help the player with stat, skill, and class checks in this game is good. It's also a sensible improvement. It makes the team be what it should be, balanced. But because the team actually has your back in this game, it also means that it's not as reliant on you carrying it. Whether or not your PC has a certain skill or stat to pass a check is less of a concern, and you can experience the story with greater ease. Number 2 is that the karma given out in the game, Shadowrun's label for experience points, is very generous. By the end of the main campaign, I was sitting on karma in case there was a high intelligence, willpower, or other check at the end. I wanted to beat the big bad as interestingly as possible, and, well, instead I just had a ton of points that I could have used and didn't. This happened because there were way more points than I needed. Combat was easy. I only encountered actual difficulty 3 times. 1 time was due to ridiculously bad luck. But that moment seemed kind of ridiculous to me, especially since there's also a boss fight on this mission, which ought to be harder than the minions, but it was easy compared to this moment of being surrounded. The other 2 rough fights happened when I decided to side with neither group when I was told to take a side, and both times my team became wedged in the middle between 2 hostile sets of enemies. Both fights offered some challenge. One of them was particularly challenging because I decided that I wanted to keep an NPC ally alive, but I couldn't control where she went and make her take cover, or get out of the way if I wanted to throw a grenade, or so on. However, despite my karma hoarding, I was still able to beat all of these fights. Otherwise, fights were a breeze. For example, even the final BBEG wasn't as hard as those rough moments that I just listed. Meanwhile, most of the dialogue checks were either charisma-based or covered by my team. As a result, I just didn't need to spend the points. Beating every sort of challenge was easy, and I didn't feel pressured to level up. So, in retrospect, I could have played as any class and still had a roleplay-heavy playthrough if I'd wanted to. And I think that this is a very good thing, because it means that different playstyles are actually catered to well. Whether a player wants to go combat heavy, roleplay heavy, or a mix of the 2, then the game can deliver. However, there is also a downside to this. The downside being that if you're looking for a challenging gameplay, then the main campaign for Shadowrun Hong Kong won't really deliver on that. It covers the players so well that it's kind of like playing in protective padding. The karma's just too generous. I say this because I did play on hard mode. The 3 difficulty modes are easy, normal, and hard, so it doesn't get any harder than the setting that I used. Tactically, it's just not much of a challenge for anybody used to these sorts of games. Plus, keep in mind that if I had spent all of the points that I'd hoarded and leveled up fully, then every mission would have been even more of a milk run. That's notable, since without leveling up, even the final big bad went down easily. I bet even the 3 challenging moments that I mentioned wouldn't have been challenging either had I used all my points. So what difficulty there was, I kinda made for myself. By the way, this ease of play also goes for the puzzles. For example, breaking through a firewall is essentially playing that old Simon game on a keypad and then doing a quick matching game. Maneuvering around the tracks I found slightly challenging, but that's about it. Still though, despite those points on the difficulty, the game is still very fun in other ways. Exploring the setting is interesting. The mysteries in the story are fun to uncover too. Meanwhile, the game's characters are also well written, and I don't just mean the companion characters. Even the NPCs in town have backstories, and some of them have minor subplots, which the character can influence through dialogue choices. The companion characters are even more developed than the townspeople. I was impressed with the amount of detail. So if you're into feeling immersed into a setting, then Shadowrun Hong Kong delivers on that. Altogether, because combat was so easy and the puzzles were too, it reminds me strongly of a good visual novel or text-based choose-your-own-adventure game, just in an appealing, isometric form. Because those traits are what stood out to me, the level of choice and story here was pretty great. I liked how most of the obstacles could be solved in a variety of ways. Of course, various solutions would often come to the same conclusion. A mission can only end in so many ways, or else the campaign story would branch out of control for the devs. But the gameplay was creative enough that these limitations weren't problematic. Its choices still felt wide-ranging, despite coming to a set of endings. As for bugs, there were a few. The worst one happened during Gobbet's side quest. Some NPCs randomly began running back and forth on a loop. This caused the game to say that I couldn't save because the player can't save during an NPC's turn. I reloaded my prior save, but it was screwed over too. I'd saved it on the same level of the zone, and it was being retroactively affected. This was a weird glitch. I wound up having to go back to an earlier save, to one where I was on a different level of the area. Otherwise, the gameplay was rather smooth. I noticed a few visual glitches, such as my character randomly doing a T-pose at one point and then snapping out of it, but these were small issues and they went away quickly. As for how long it takes to beat, I investigated the dialogue trees in depth, often reloading saves to see what would have been said if I chose another option, did the companion side quests, and so on. Most people seem to complete the game much faster. I played for over 40 hours. And by the way, reloading saves to see what if I chose this dialogue choice instead was often pointless. Most of the dialogue isn't as unique as it seems and is just flavor text. Choices usually wind up leading to the same information and have minor differences. A character might give you a detail that you wouldn't have otherwise learned about them, or will be happier or sadder with how you spoke to them. However, which choices will have an obviously different effect on the dialogue are usually obvious. The characters, setting, variety of choices, and story all drew me in and kept my interest up. This was why I also played the bonus campaign afterward. Once you've completed the main campaign, then you can select the bonus campaign on the main menu. It'll carry over your save data, and many of the choices that you made in the main campaign do matter. The bonus campaign is decent. Its story isn't as strong as the main campaigns, but the characters are still interesting and still mostly well written. Meanwhile, the combat is also harder on hard mode. The final fight of the bonus campaign was actually difficult for me. I spent some of my hoarded karma points. But as I said, its story wasn't as on point. It was still interesting enough to finish, especially since it's not a long campaign, yet its plot was often stretched. For example, your team's houseboat gets relocated when that's not necessary. It'd be a huge hassle and a huge investment of resources to move it. This is because it has to be dragged through a minefield when it's not seaworthy. And this is despite the fact that even smaller, highly maneuverable boats have trouble safely navigating the same area. So why would someone bother doing that relocation? It seemed like unnecessary metagaming nonsense, which was just done to keep the base location in play for the plot. There were several issues like that one. Plus, while the characters were mostly on point, there were some noticeable lapses. For example, while I won't spoil plot points, I will say that I thought Duncan broke character after I made a certain decision. Duncan is a character who's a confrontational hothead, and at the point I made the decision, he cared about two people. Neither his confrontational nature nor his caring were reflected in how he reacted after my decision, and his reaction also did affect the ending in a way that I thought was a little weird. All in all, I liked the bonus campaign, but not as much as I did the main campaign. And I think that I liked the bonus campaign just because I liked revisiting the setting, gameplay, and the characters. So it's what the label says it is, a bonus. It's not a great adventure, not bad, but somewhere in between. It's also tacked on to a really great main campaign. I kind of view it like staying after the credits to watch a clip after a good movie. It's not going to be as great as the movie, but it's a nice little bonus, worth sticking around for. The look and the sound. The graphics are pretty good. I would have liked to have been able to zoom in a little bit more because the characters' faces often looked oddly blank. However, that was a minor flaw. Similarly, I disliked how other areas of the map were visible when zoomed out, but this was also a minor flaw. Other than such minor problems, the graphics were very good for an isometric game. I appreciated the attention to detail that was often shown and the little futuristic touches that were scattered about in the background art. Plus, I also noticed some improvements compared to their prior game in the series. For example, the interface for leveling up was much nicer looking and better organized than it was in Dragonfall. The soundtrack blends in well and adds to the atmosphere. Final thoughts. I think that Shadowrun Hong Kong shines in its storytelling. For those who enjoy an immersive story with depth to it, including some interesting twists, then I think it'd be a well-liked game. It's a good RPG and filled with interesting characters. I was often surprised at how interactive the NPCs were and how detailed their backstories were. I liked several of the companions and some of the townspeople too. That said, experienced players looking for a tactical turn-based challenge, even on hard mode, would likely feel disappointed. Its puzzles and battle tactics aren't complicated. The mysteries are also easy enough to solve if a player's being attentive. I would have appreciated more complexity in these areas. Yet, despite its simplicity in those areas, the gameplay does offer a variety of choices when it comes to how to handle situations. This complexity in choice was satisfying. You could often bribe, pass a check, fight, or find an alternative solution to a problem. This mix of what a player could do allowed for a feeling of agency that most games, in my experience, often lack. So if you like role-playing games, then I do suggest Shadowrun Hong Kong. But if you're looking for a tactical challenge and aren't as into story or dialogue, then you probably wouldn't like it as much as I did. And on a final side note, the game does come with an editor. It lets players create their own campaigns and share them with others. However, as you can see, using it would take some effort. I tried playing around with it, but it couldn't find the content pack that it needed to access assets, and I wasn't in the mood to try to troubleshoot it. I may play around with it more someday, but it seems like it would have a bit of a learning curve. However, there's plenty of info out there on the editor. Others have put up how-to videos and guides. If you're curious, then it should be pretty easy to find in-depth info on how it works, and make your own campaigns.
Meet me in Hong Kong right away. I'll explain more when you get here. I'm begging you.